We're good, okay. Good evening, Winchester, and welcome to the combined, I gotta get this right, Planning Board, Historical Commission, Design Review Committee, and Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. And no order of importance there, except of course Planning Board, because we're first. So this evening is really going to be an educational seminar run by Town Attorney Art Krieger, Town Council. And it's a chance for all of these boards to get up to speed on various things that we should know about. For instance, the open meeting law, how we deal with revised plans, permitting as they come through town, notification to abutters, interpretation of zoning bylaw and guidelines, how we use outside consultants. It's just an opportunity for all of these boards who sort of communicate to each other, usually through documents, to come together and talk about how we can improve the process, or to find out if there are places where we have miscommunications and we can fix them. And so this is, I mean, we are in a judgment-free zone here. So all questions are great. Please, let's have patience with each other, because not everyone has the same depth of knowledge as everyone else, and Art here has the largest depth of knowledge, so we'll defer to Art at all times.
I'll be patient with all of you, it's okay.
Oh, thank you. I took that. Yes, no questions are stupid. Some answers might be. No questions are stupid. Okay, and without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Art, and if you haven't had a chance to sign in, please sign in before you leave. Oh, one thing we might do is go around the table and just identify. I know there are people here who I kind of recognize, but I'm not sure who they are. So I'll start. I'm Dee Abjurius, Chair of the Planning Board.
I'm Heather Hannon, Planning Board.
Peter LaBeouf, Design Review Committee.
Bruce Hickey, Historical Commission. Jack J, Historical Commission Chair.
John Thompson, Historical Commission.
Eileen Shari, VRC.
I'm Michelle McCarthy, Historic Commission.
Maureen Meister, Planning Board.
Mark Regan, CDA.
Francis Kelly, Planning Department.
And Art Krieger from Anderson and Krieger Town Council.
And we had Heather von Mering, Planning Board. And we are being taped. We're live on WinCam, so if you want to speak, please try to direct your voice at the microphones, because otherwise they'll just see your mouths moving and they will not hear anything. So, thank you.
Thank you, it's nice to see everyone and to meet those whom I haven't met yet. I've been asked to moderate the meeting just to keep it moving through the agenda, because there's a lot to cover in fairly short time. The first part will be not as much of a discussion as I hope the later parts will. I was asked to give an overview of the basic requirements of the open meeting law, including an important recent case update. So I will do that. Obviously, it's not a lecture. I will be happy to take questions during it or at the end or whenever you want. And if things aren't clear, I'm happy to go into more detail or go over anything. The open meeting law is an important law for public process, for public participation, for transparency. But it is a difficult law to comply with because it's not entirely intuitive. It's very picky, and it's being enforced fairly strictly. I'm not going to go through all the concepts in it. Some of the things are just procedural, like when and how do you post notice of a meeting, how do you go into executive session or out of executive session. I want to just cover the basics tonight. There are three key definitions in the open meeting law. One is a meeting, one is a deliberation, and one is the public body. A meeting is defined with respect to the other terms. It's a deliberation by a public body with respect to any matter within the body's jurisdiction. So anything you're taking up within the course of your board or commission's bailiwick, any agenda item before you that has to do with your board's official business, is a meeting if there's a quorum communicating, as I'll describe in more detail. Certain things are not a meeting. Thankfully, a public or private gathering, like a social gathering or a conference, an on-site inspection. So site visits are fine as long as you don't talk about the matter during the visit. If you're just viewing it or getting basic description and orientation from whoever's running the site visit. If you're attending a meeting of another public body, if you're sitting in the audience, as long as in any of those occasions, you don't actually huddle and deliberate in the corner of the social meeting or the corner of the site visit. So that's not the surprising part, or that's not the part that gives people problems. Deliberation is a little trickier. It's an oral written communication through any medium, including email, between or among a quorum of the public body on public business within its jurisdiction. But it's not just what you think of as deliberation, the back and forth, the debate, the weighing of pros and cons, it's assessment of the bylaw criteria. It's much more than that. It's really any expression of opinion to or from fellow board members about a matter before you. So sending a communication with your opinion to other board members, even if there's no back and forth and no response, is a deliberation. You have effectively communicated your opinion, and that's, even though it's not a two-way, it's not a dialogue, that's still considered a deliberation. Yeah.
So you mentioned quorum. Is that part of the definition?
Yes.
So if you lack a quorum in your emails, you're not deliberating?
Correct, but you can't do it serially. You can't have, I mean, this comes up, and it comes up innocently, because you get something interesting and you forward it to the other board members, or you reply all. You got just two of you are communicating on a 5-member board, that's fine, but now you reply all, and now you've pulled everybody else in. So as long as it stays less than a quorum, that's fine.
Can I ask a technical question on that
Sure.
as well? So if there's an issue that, say I'm working on with the Historical Commission, and I email members of the Historical Commission one-on-one with the same questions to them, is that deliberation? Even though they're not talking to each other, they're communicating directly to me, and I'm asking them questions.
Okay, so you as a member of the planning board are communicating with the Historic Commission?
Yeah, but let's say I'm email the whole commission individually, saying.
That's fine, because you're not a member of the commission, as long as they don't then respond to each other about that.
Yep. I just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
So you said things of interest that I should, like, for instance, let's say I find an article that's of interest to the rest of the planning board. Can I send a link to that article to the planning boards, or is that considered an opinion that I am communicating?
Probably depends what the article is.
Well,
It depends what the
What you
article
say about the article.
Because on occasion, planning board members find articles of interest and want to share it with each other.
if it doesn't have to do with a pending matter before you, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Well, it's usually about a topic that we would care about.
Yes.
If there was no deliberation about the article.
Well, but again, deliberation would be this, if there was a matter pending before the board, even though there's no deliberation, just sending an article that bore on that matter
Yeah.
would be a deliberation.
Okay.
So the answer to
Can
everyone
Brian
is,
still-
if you're in doubt, call us. That's what we're there for. But if it's not related to a pending matter, if it's general information about something that certainly the planning board's interested in, and it might become relevant, I think it's probably okay.
Okay.
Well, and also the follow-up, but not the same, but related. My understanding was that anything that goes into email could be considered a public record, and therefore it's just public record. So that's also sort of a cure to any challenge, as long as it's not being debated, but
Well,
it's just out there.
Public records is a whole separate topic, and curing open meeting law violations is a whole separate topic.
Yeah, I guess what-
Well, there is a doctrine of curing. You can cure certain
Okay,
things.
maybe that's what I meant.
But that's probably a topic, public record is probably a topic for a different day. Also, by the way, a topic for a different day is the State Ethics Act, recusals and conflicts of interest, on which we should probably conduct a training for this group and the rest of your boards and
I
commissions.
thought the select board was taking that on, they were coordinating it because they were going to be part of that.
Yeah, I think that's right, yeah. So the Attorney General's and our advice is just keep it to yourself until you get to the meeting, until you're talking about it in an open meeting. Now, there's a certain cost to efficiency here. You want to be able to send things out ahead of a meeting so that people are prepared. You don't want everybody reading a document for the first time at a meeting. And the audience is sitting there, and that's just dumb. And so you can circulate materials. You can communicate outside of, you can use email, it would be the typical way, but you can use any medium of communication to distribute, of course, the meeting agenda. That's not deliberating on anything. Scheduling information, that's not really deliberating. Procedural information, who's coming, how many votes do we need for this particular thing that's coming up next Tuesday, whatever. And more, with more substance, reports or documents. You can circulate reports or documents outside of a meeting, provided no opinion of the member circulating it or anybody else is expressed. So it's not just the cover letter that can't express an opinion, like here's a document that bears on our hearing on the Smith case. Just sending that out without editorializing is not enough. If the document itself expresses an opinion on somebody's opinion on the Smith case. Now, to make this a little more concrete, if I'm a board member and I circulate something a document that I've prepared, I'm giving my opinion to my fellow board members. That's no good. If I'm circulating a document that came from outside, and I editorialize in the cover email, that's no good. Now I'm giving my opinion again. If it's a document prepared by somebody else, and I'm just circulating it without comment so that people are prepared for the meeting, that's probably okay. Which may come back to your question, Diab. If it's a third-party document, or an article, as you said, that may be okay even on a specific matter. So I said before, it's okay if it's not on a specific matter, even if it is, but there's no opinion of a member being expressed in the transmission or the document.
It just says for discussion on Tuesday.
Yep. Yep. Please read before Tuesday. But this exception is a tricky one, and again, feel free to call us. The protocol for calling us is sometimes to go through Richard, the town manager. Sometimes, I'm happy for you to call us directly. The town wants to keep an eye on the time and fees. So at least let Richard know if you're contacting us so that he can keep tabs on that. I'm likely to include him on any reply so that if you didn't let him know that you're consulting me, I want him to know that I've answered you. There's a recent case called the Bolter case that you may have heard about, which clarified the meaning of deliberation and clarified it in the ways, to the end that I just talked about. The court held that any circulation of documents containing an opinion of members, even without any back and forth, constitutes deliberation to which the public must be permitted access. What happened there was a review of a town administrator. There were some individual evaluations that came into the chair. The chair did a composite evaluation and circulated it without comment. It was but circulated it, and the evaluations themselves contained selectmen's opinions on the matter before the selectmen, namely the personnel evaluation. And the court held that was an open meeting law violation because the public had no access to those documents, and pretty much the die was cast on the town administrator's future as soon as people read those evaluations before the meeting took place. So the AG has amended its guidance in this area as follows. So members of a board or committee may submit opinions before a meeting to a staff person for compilation, if that's what you need to do. The staff person can put them together, but the compiled opinions can only be circulated to members if, of course, at the meeting is fine, but before the meeting, they also have to be released to the public at the same time. This is sort of just grafted on. It really has nothing to do with the definition of deliberation, but the court sort of gave a nod to allowing some efficiency. So if you're willing to put it on the website, and paper copies in the clerk's office is ideal, then yes, you can send those out beforehand, because then it's not being done privately, it's being done publicly, and everybody can see what the board members or commission members are looking at.
So, I think I'm not quite understanding how far this decision goes. So even though the matter was purely a personnel issue, because the chair put their opinions on document, it counts as an open.
Well, the fact that it was personnel didn't matter because it was a matter within the selectmen's jurisdiction. So it was a matter pending before the board within their jurisdiction, whether it was personnel or something else. But it arose in the personnel context because that's why people were doing evaluations. But the fact that the chair circulated the evaluations, everybody's evaluation to everybody else,
But it was before they met. regardless.
before the
It
meeting.
was before they
Before
met.
the meeting. Everybody, so the,
Right, but if presumably the deliberation at the meeting would have been an executive session. So typically, those discussions don't fall under open meeting law, correct?
well, right, executive session, you're exempt from the open meeting law.
So
you're
if the
properly in
documents are
executive session.
related to the executive session and they're circulated, they're still,
Either the board didn't go into executive session and it wasn't an issue in the case.
okay.
So we have to meet always first and then designate the person who's going to come with a vote for the decision. And then, so for example, we come up with recommendations for the ZBA. We meet, we put it all in, this is what we want in the letter. Deanne composes the letter and sends it out based on the vote that happened at this table,
At an open meeting.
at an open meeting. And then, but he compiles it and then sends it
Just
out.
have to authorize him.
But we authorize him
That's
to
fine.
do it
That's
in
fine.
that open meeting. So
Right.
that's okay. It's if we did not meet and you created that letter and then distributed it for feedback.
Well, this is very pertinent because we're going to executive session this evening to do a personnel evaluation.
Right.
So I'm trying to understand what is allowable before and after that evaluation. So maybe I should pick this up later
Right,
in
that's
more
my
detail.
reaction, because it doesn't affect most.
Okay.
people.
Yeah.
Okay. This is, as you can hear from my explanation and people's questions, it's a tricky area. Exactly what you can and cannot do, what you can circulate before a meeting. The safest course is to put it on the website when you're circulating it, but of course you may not want to do that. I mean, that's the problem with the opinion, is a lot of these things, you don't want to put them on the website yet. You don't want to put individual evaluations up there yet. But you're going to be talking about them in an open meeting eventually anyway, unless it's executive session. Executive session puts a whole, adds another layer to it that the court didn't deal with, and we'd have to walk through it when it arose. But leaving executive session aside, if you're going to talk about it at the open meeting anyway, the court figures what's the harm in making you put it up on the website and making it publicly available ahead of time. Anyway, that's the law at the moment, and the AG's guidance on it. The third of the definitions I mentioned, and I do want to stick to the agenda, so I'll wrap up quickly. Well, I had 7:30, okay. Public body is not staff, but it is every board, commission, committee, subcommittee that's created, elected, appointed to serve a public purpose, which all of these would be, including any advisory subcommittees. So a subcommittee is its own open meeting law body.
Working groups are not.
Working groups of board members?
Yes, the composition of the working group for board members.
Usually it's not a quorum though. Working groups are not quorums.
I was gonna say,
Two
it-
people, the planning board who are working
Not
on
always.
something. That's true.
If there's a quorum, that, every working group meeting would have to be posted.
Right.
And subject to the open meeting law, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm not sure why a working group would have a quorum of any of these bodies, as opposed to just one or two members.
I
Correct. Yeah.
agree, I know, exactly, they had quorum.
Okay. I'll skip the notice and posting in the interest of time and some of the other issues. There's remote participation that comes up sometimes. Somebody's away for the winter or sick or can't make it. There is some ability to participate remotely. But let me go to the
When can you
exceptions.
not? When can you not? Is that what you're going into? When can you not participate remotely?
I wasn't going to go into that. I'm happy to. The participation by members of a public body in a meeting, remote participation, is allowed if the select board adopts that rule for all town public bodies.
So have they?
Uh,
Everyone
don't-
does it. Everyone's doing it.
That's not the ideal answer.
It's totally the truth.
I don't know if the select board has
Can you look into that?
adopted the rule. Yeah, sure.
Because they're calling in.
Well, like, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm pretty sure I mean, at some point, you know.
So they
You put
need
the
to
telephone in
adopt
the
it.
middle
They
and
need to adopt it.
participate.
It may have been adopted just years ago, by a previous board,
Right.
prior to ours.
The way remote participation is done, it has to be audible to everybody. There are certain restrictions on how it's done, but nothing surprising in them, so I'll skip over that unless there are other questions. Let me just talk about the exceptions to the open meeting law. The executive session that you've all heard about, I don't know if every board or commission has had to deal with executive session. The key ones for the permitting boards are strategy for litigation. If discussing your strategy in open session would prejudice your litigation position, then with the proper steps, you're allowed to go into executive session. You always have to start in open session. You always have to have a roll call vote to go into executive session and to come out of executive session, and you have to say at the beginning whether you are going to come out of executive session into open session. Because it may be that, although the deliberation on some strategic point can be done in executive session, if there's a decision reached about how to proceed, you may need to do that in open session. That just announcing the course of action wouldn't prejudice your position in the way that deliberating about different courses would. So you have to go into it carefully, you have to come out of it and say whether you're going to come out of it into open session so that the public knows whether to stick around. And there are other formalities. But litigation is one of them. Preliminary screening for employment, again, if it would be detrimental because applicants don't want to be known yet at the preliminary stage, they don't want their current jobs jeopardized or they don't want to go public. So there's some ability for screening committees to be in executive session up to a certain point, property acquisition, et cetera. There are 10 exceptions. Most of them are pretty rare. But if you feel a need to go into executive session because something is sensitive, just call me and we'll figure out whether it fits in within one of the exceptions. When I say call me, none of you whom I haven't met has my contact info. Obviously, the office has it. The boards and officials with whom I have been working have it. I have some business cards, which I'm happy to give you, but I assume you're going to get a copy of the sign-up sheet, and my email address is on there. Anderson and Krieger is the law firm. You can just look on our website as well. And the other person who is sort of co-town council, more or less, is a young partner at our firm named Mina Macarius. Mina, M-I-N-A. It's a man, and you can ask for either of us. All right, 7:30. I want to stay on schedule, but I'll take a minute or two of questions if there are any. As I said, it's a difficult area, and it's strictly enforced. So you got to pay attention to that deliberation rule. Okay, if there are no questions, we'll keep going. That's the end of my sort of keeping the microphone. For the rest of the meeting, I think I'm going to be just facilitating a discussion, and we'll see where it goes on each of these topics. So the next one on the agenda is the protocol for revised plans. This is a situation where an applicant comes before different boards, and in the course of going before one of them, revises the plans, and the question is, do you now have to go back to all the others? What sequence do you do it in, et cetera? You want to introduce the topic in a little more detail than that?
I mean, I wish I could give more details, but I think we found ourselves that there are like really certain circumstances where it makes sense for not necessarily to get circulated around, but for the non-special permit granting authority to maybe look at something or re-review it, but I think what I was finding was that it was extremely burdensome for applicants specifically in order to either hire an attorney or an architect for that night to go back to all these night meetings. It seems there has to be some type of middle ground by not forcing basically not forcing them to go back to all of the planning board, historical commission, design review on a special permit. So it should be, if there's any revised plans, I don't know what to do, whether it's up to each individual board or committee to decide whether they want to re-review it, but I still don't think that it makes sense to really have that, to make it seem like the applicant should come back to all the boards and committees. I don't think, and they might feel it gives them a leg up, And I don't want them to feel that way. I think they should go through the process. Everyone gives comments, and then it should hopefully stay at ZBA level. But there are other ways that we can deal with it, and that was what the main discussion was.
So what have the experiences been, or the problems in this area by any of the boards and commissions?
We get killed by it. I mean, we have people coming in, we present a new plan, it's been rejected the first time. And we'll assume that it's been, for reason, they didn't review it again, and the person presenting it may actually say this is fine now, and we don't know. So, Prosecutor actually did the right thing, but he came in 3 separate times, and we each thought each time he came in, he had been to see you, and he was just doing drawings in between. So I think that presented a problem.
Definitely.
They won't like it.
You want to see them go back to everybody?
It's a new set of plans. To me, it's from scratch in a lot of cases. I mean, there's this issue of how major or minor they are. But on a site review, I think it's important that they get a clean bill from you. We rely on your stuff for whether this is okay or not.
So if we
Yeah.
approve with conditions, or if we recommend, recommend not going forward, unfavorable action, I think that we should see the plans again to see if they actually
Implemented.
change them
Right.
to
the point
address
where
the
they've come into
comments.
compliance.
Right.
Because if we don't have that, they don't come back to us, they'll tell the ZBA they did it
Yeah.
when they really didn't.
Right.
I don't think that, I mean, I don't see that as being a problem. I mean, the comments from the DRC get forwarded to the zoning board of appeals. It's then, in my opinion, and this is what the discussion is about, it's not just about my opinion here, but my opinion is that, that it's then the zoning board's job to see whether or not that applicant adhered to those, if they feel that it's important.
So I see it as a different perspective because, for example, design review has said in the past, the roof is out of scale. So they go back, they change the roof, resubmit, but it is still out of scale. But they go see the ZBA and they say, well, we fixed our roof, it's now
Right.
in scale. But the
Right.
design review would say, no,
No,
it's
no,
not.
exactly.
You didn't do it. You actually, you changed it, but you did not bring it into scale with the neighborhood. So that's where we're getting little hiccups. The other thing we are getting is, some of it also is not changing, it's also, we are finding incomplete packages. We say they're missing this, this, and this.
That's the worst.
And then they, at the last minute, sneak in those documents to the ZBA, and then it wasn't reviewed by design review or historical or planning board. And that is another tricky
Yeah.
thing. So you don't know if it's because, what they're doing, but I think it's actually, in some ways, it's, what we're seeing is not to the benefit of the town, it's to the benefit of the applicant right now, that they are sneaking in and they're making these modifications, or they're saying, they're putting words in the board's mouths at the
Right.
ZBA, and the commissions, and that's what actually, our voice is not being represented at those meetings. And we also, I mean, the amount of time we commit in a planning board to our time here in our own meetings, we don't have the ability to go, so we count on those letters to get to the ZBA for clarity, but they're totally muddled when they're coming in incomplete, or they're coming in with changes and stuff. Ours, it's pretty much, our letter's now obsolete in a lot of points we make.
Right, we do generally, I completely agree with you, we do generally try to comment that this package is incomplete when we see it, so that the ZBA will know what was, and we try to be specific as to what's missing whenever it's possible. You know, sometimes it's vastly incomplete, but if there's a few specific items that we're looking for, like a landscape plan or a site, you know, whatever it is, we try to indicate that so that they know that we have not actually seen that, even so if it does get slipped in, then at least there's a written record that, you know, we didn't see it.
But there's not a protocol right now of who does what, because it comes in, like, sometimes you review before the planning board, we see it come in, but then there's a last minute submittal that we end up with. So we're reviewing a complete package. The ZBA is reviewing a complete package, you didn't, or whoever, it depends on which of the commissions and boards reviews in what order. But that's the other thing that's going on. There's no protocol right now of, do we kick them back and start them back from day?
Isn't there a protocol that if the package isn't complete, it shouldn't be looked at? I guess this is the part I keep getting at the meeting. We keep getting partial packages or people handing stuff across the table during the meeting and says,
Yeah.
don't look at the one in the package there.
that's gonna be in a violation, but this one's okay. And it's hand-drawn, it's not stamped, and, and you go like, I don't know what to do with it. And we spend an hour talking about a package that it hasn't been done yet.
I share your pain, yes.
No, but we've had two of these meetings where people.
We all see those.
Right, but we have to sit there for an hour,
Right.
Well, I think the planning.
and you can't vote it.
The building department has been doing much better recently
They have
about
been,
ensuring that
yes.
the packets are complete, and I think we do have some sort of a checklist, is that?
There's a checklist, yeah.
Yeah, but there's nothing.
We're still getting stuff
nothing
across the
new.
table.
Yeah.
Right, so I think a way forward would be for everyone, all the boards get a checklist along with the packet, and they mark off and they declare, these are the things we expect, these are the things that are there, these are the things that are not there. And that gets sent to the building department, and then everything stops after that until all of those are checked.
Yeah.
So there's no point in going all the way to the ZBA with an incomplete packet.
That was for the developer.
Well, I'm talking, let's talk about getting the process right. There's no point, so.
We asked Art, and Art tell us what we should be doing. What is the best thing to support the town?
It's
Or
actually
what do
2
other-
points, isn't it? It's the submittals, but then the other is this iterative aspect,
Right,
which they are.
right, we're at, right.
Got 2 different topics.
Yeah.
That's correct. So the only legal principle here is don't yank around the applicant. The practical principle is preserve the board's time and resources and don't make them waste time at volunteer boards doing these evening hearings when the package isn't complete.
What do you mean by don't yank about? I'm missing the don't yank about.
That has to do more with the iteration between going back to, sending back to other boards.
To
I'll
three
come
more
back to
night,
that.
to 3 more night meetings.
Right.
And even maybe
We'll
3
come back
more
to
night
that.
meetings, yeah.
Other than that.
But if they haven't completed
No,
their,
no,
their,
Yeah,
okay, sorry.
no. That comment refers to the issue we started on, which is making somebody go back to other boards and repeat. And I don't mean you can't do that, I mean, but you got to have a good reason you can't do it.
Well, if they fail, if the design, I guess this is my question, if the design failed, you're letting them stay in the process instead of starting from scratch. If they present a design and it either is out of dimensional, or if one of the boards rejects it,
Well, if an advisory board rejects it, it's just advisory.
right?
So
Right.
if the applicant wants to go to the ZBA,
It can.
knowing that planning and design review have both said that this is horrible,
Right,
they can do it.
right. But they kind of get told at that point that it's unlikely that we'll override 2 boards.
They may think for, on a given issue, that it's unlikely, or, they may think anything on that, but that's their choice.
Okay.
And as long as it's an informed choice, they understand that it's an advisory opinion and it's a rejection. If they want to go ahead, they can go ahead. If they want to revise their plans before they ever get to the ZBA to try and satisfy the other boards, that's what they ought to do.
That's the next question. Should that be handled?
In what way?
Well, they've revised it, so we've not seen it, and I think Heather did a good job explaining it. So it's been revised, but maybe we would think it's better, and maybe we wouldn't think it's really any better at all. So at that point,
Well-
what's reasonable? Or is it reasonable to say, hang on, go back again, it's time to be great.
I would think that if it's minor revisions, the ZBA could take it up without making them go back. If it's a major revision, the ZBA should say, this project is is significantly different enough from the first one that you really haven't gone to these boards on that on the current project.
Is it clear to the ZBA? I'm not sure, I don't know, because I'm not at the end of this whole process, but is it clear when it's been revised? Oh, and is different from what the advisory boards have seen?
Yes.
It is clear.
It's been changed.
Should be clear based on revision dates on the stamped plans.
Right, because it's all going to be.
And they'll usually,
So
they
then
they usually
it would
discuss
be-
that,
the
but they'll
point
say,
is that it would be the ZBA, but they wouldn't know they couldn't even make that decision until they've met. So basically, they have to meet to say, well, it looks like you've made substantial changes, but we don't know what the other board would think. So at that point, it's another month of go-round. And maybe that's fine. Is that what you're saying?
Ideally, staff would be telling the applicant, all right, here's the situation, you're showing me this revised plan, there's a risk that the ZBA is going to say this is a major revision and you should go back. So maybe the better thing is to go back now.
Is staff really the planner, or is the staff the building
Well,
commissioner? Who's staff?
Maybe it's Janine, I don't know. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, that's it. I don't know.
I don't know. So things could come to you that you think don't belong in front of you, because they haven't, the current version hasn't been before the other boards yet. You kick it back, and that's the applicant's problem. Don't take, I mean, you know.
So,
I guess I would say that don't take an hour discussing it, just focus on whether it's a significant enough change
major or minor.
that it should go back.
Okay, so
That's
that,
substantial change.
okay, so how do you, so it's essentially a ZBA vote to say whether this is a major, when they've come back, whether it's a major revision or a minor revision. And if it's a minor revision, it would not go to any of these other boards and committees. If it's considered a major, and we don't need to memorialize this in any, in the zoning bylaw at all, right?
No.
So then a major, a major revision, and then everyone goes through the, another month.
But let me just say, at the other end, so you review a 50-foot high roof, and you think it's way out of scale, you can probably help streamline the process by giving some clear direction for what would.
In our conditions, so you can say, if you get down to 35, for example, then.
Yeah, I don't know if you can get that specific, but yeah, you could say, if you're in the 30 to 40 range, that may be acceptable if, if it otherwise blends in.
So
I mean, maybe you can make it so that the ZBA has a good idea of what would have been acceptable to you and what wouldn't.
Yeah, we've been trying to do that.
And we have too.
Yeah.
You're on which board?
DRC.
You're DRC also, okay.
And I want to follow up and say, I've read more than once, and I'm sorry, we've only got one person from the zoning board here, but that the regulations are really skimpy, and so this, and we're still in the world of procedures, and this procedure really could be expanded upon in the regulations. So I don't know if Art would be the one to work with the ZBA, or how that.
Yeah.
Procedures really do need more fleshing out.
The rules and regs of the ZBA is what you're referencing.
One thing I am concerned about, which I don't think has been covered here, which is when the ZBA gets an opinion which they find hard to understand or parse. And I know, for instance, we had something, it was, I don't know, wasn't that a duplex?
Dormer?
Dormer. There may have been a dormer, a big dormer discussion on is this a dormer or isn't this a dormer? And so,
Richardson?
Yeah.
just to pull out a recent example. So one of the things I'm concerned about is by the time things get to you, you're stuck with whatever's been written. You can't call up and say, yo, you're confused here, or we don't understand what you're trying to say, please be clearer. So I don't know how to solve that problem other than that you tell us, even if you have to make a decision, say, what you gave us was not clear enough. We don't understand.
And in that case, it was interesting because I think that's one that was a third story on the review.
Yeah.
And we sat in the ZBA meeting, and the definition that Janine brought up in the meeting, because she said it's actually a 2.5, and she cited something. So I didn't know, and we can't during that meeting say, you're wrong, you're wrong. That's a matter of law at that point.
Yeah,
So you approve
perhaps this was, yeah,
I'm just going by how it's described to us. So you described it, and it looked to me on the sheets, I'm just telling you, it looked like it was a 3-story. I read it, and you said it's a 3-story house. I looked at it, said, I think that's true, right? Small, high, looks like a 3-story. Get in the meeting, and we just all basically were about to shelve it. No, not true. Each of us were talking about it, and I think we're all running towards a certain direction. This is 3 stories. You just can't do that. Janine pointed out that the definitions about where those dormers were relative to the end of the roof line, she said, that one's legal. Now, at that point, this has all been shelved, and for an answer, we need to put it away because we don't know.
yeah, I mean, I have to admit, perhaps I used the wrong example to make my point. I didn't really mean to
That's the thing, there's more
drag in the question of how you arrived at the decision. I'm just concerned that if you get something from the boards which isn't clear, that there has to be some means of communicating back to us that you require more information. And obviously, it can't work perhaps on that one permit that's in front of you at the moment, but the planning board doesn't get much feedback from the ZBA saying, you're not giving us enough detail. You're trying to give us a context, but the context is meaningless to us because you have left something out. And that sort of communication is really useful.
Oh, I agree with that,
So-
but I don't know where legally what we're allowed to do I go in occasionally to ask questions before the meetings because I am confused. But I asked Brian, right? You know,
But aside from open meeting law issues,
Yeah.
I don't see any legal impediment to the ZBA asking the planning board to clarify something. Or, to take the example that you were talking about, to ask the ZBA if what Janine said changes their view of things. Changes their view of whether it's 2.5 stories or 3 stories. I don't see why there can't be any discussion as long as each board is complying with open meeting law.
Right,
I
yeah.
have a related question. So I know like somebody who sits on the ZBA in Brookline, my understanding is there is a professional staff member, a member of the professional staff who sits with that ZBA when they meet. Is that what we should really be working toward in terms of staffing? Sorry, but I mean, we have to.
I'm smiling only because
We only know Winchester.
my experience with that particular professional staff has not been that rewarding.
Oh, okay.
But leaving that
Okay, I
aside,
just
that's
don't
my
know.
problem.
I don't even know, maybe it's an alternate.
She never met a project she didn't like.
Oh, no, it's a
No, I was actually thinking the same thing, like, just curious, but Brian, I know
What's
some, do you
normal?
attend the ZBA meetings?
No.
No, because I know you attend the planning board meetings.
Yeah, I staff the planning.
Because had you been at the planning board meeting where they talked about this project, and then had you been at
Reporting
ZBA,
for
you
the
might have
board.
been able to
Oh, no, of course,
weigh in,
course.
which would have been helpful to ZBA.
What would you think is, for a town this size, what would be a reasonable staffing expectation?
Well,
But no,
yeah,
it's. We're all going, look at this
legal
whole
discussion.
board of people.
yeah, it's
Five
not.
more people in the planning department is the correct answer.
It's not really a legal issue. No, more staff would always be helpful, but there's no reason that more dialogue between the boards and the way that we're discussing can't solve the problem.
Oh, many of us have lived in this town for all the times we've been in town government, so it's like.
We were just
Would
trying
it
to-
normally be a person from the planning, like, would you expect a planning board staff person to report
Some-
for the board?
There are definitely some assistant planners that go, or they usually split, usually what happens is there's more than one person in the planning department, and they split responsibilities amongst all the night meetings, including ZBA, because it's really important.
Right.
Right. Well,
Okay.
especially
Yeah,
to
but
see it through.
When I was
Never
so
thought.
when I was on the Belmont board,
For town meeting.
the staff to the ZBA came to the ZBA meetings, but the town planner did not, unless there was a particular
So there
issue.
was staff to the ZBA, professional staff to the ZBA.
That came to the planning board meetings.
Yeah,
Was
but-
No, they came to the ZBA meetings.
the other way?
Yes, professional staff.
No, that's, I mean, we've.
But I don't actually know what his
Oh, that's
qualifications
one
were compared to the building department
Guess
staff here.
Mass Municipal Association could also advise us on where would be.
Well, the ideal staffing structure goes well beyond tonight's meeting and probably would blow the
Well,
schedule.
it's fundamental to everything we're doing.
Well, it's fundamental in a way, but the narrower, shorter-term issues can be solved without opening up the whole staffing discussion. And that staffing discussion, I'm not the person to have it with.
And we are actually running late at the moment, so I think just to sum up what we've gotten on revised plans protocol is,
That at some point, one is that the ZBA would determine once a revision comes in if it's major or minor, so it's an actual decision by the zoning board to determine whether or not it's getting kicked back to everybody. That was the only actual, and then, more communication.
I would add, it really should be embedded in an expanded regulation or procedural.
I mean, they're their rules and regs. I don't think we can tell them.
No, but I think we can encourage it and look, this is one way.
Well, whether it's a policy or regulations,
yeah,
I'm not sure it needs to be a regulation, although it could be.
I would say that we should have continued discussion about this. I mean, we have a tight schedule, so I don't see why we can't have another meeting later on to talk about improved ways of the nitty-gritty. The other thing we did talk about was making sure that everyone knows that the plans are incomplete. So if we have some sort of an official checkoff list that we could put in with each of the plans that maybe the building department would give everyone, and if they, so we could do our own checkoff. I know they check. They have
I mean,
their
they
own
do. No, they do. There is a list. There is a checklist. It comes in all of your packets every single time there's a petition.
There's a checklist?
Those
Yeah.
checklists need to be revised.
That's true.
There's a
but-
checklist, but the date of the documents coming in, so there are sheets that are coming in, one's dated
So that's
this one,
the-
one's dated that. They're
that's the
not
problem.
referenced in that checklist, they should be documented
Yeah.
and called to, so the plan that was received on this date was dated here and was done by so-and-so. But the problem we also have is a lot of those plans coming in are hand sketches that aren't dated, are barely titled and don't have scales on them, so.
But that doesn't comply, that doesn't comply with the bylaw, right? If somebody's coming to you with the hand sketch.
That's the problem.
That should, you don't have to process that.
Yeah, you shouldn't waste 4 minutes.
Yeah,
No, but that's what everyone kind of needs to hear from you.
okay, so.
That's what we need from you. is
So
just
a checklist, so you know when an application is complete, and the checklist requirements should reflect the bylaw. I mean, it's not, you're not just making stuff, making stuff
All
because
the
it's
submission
desirable.
requirements of the bylaw.
Right, yeah.
Is it just a factor of design review, usually or often being the first recipient, that I've never seen any checklist in anything that we've gotten?
I mean, they should, I mean, are you, the whole packet of the petition,
Or do we
there's- you should get that in, there's an application, there's like a 2 or 3 page application that's for all the special permits and site plan reviews. And on top of
we
that,
get that?
there, on top of that,
Okay.
but a lot of the, yeah, it's
a lot of
it does, you do get it.
It doesn't look like a checklist, though.
Yeah,
That's
you need to look like a checklist.
It needs to look like a checklist, so you have just a line of bullets which say landscaping, elevation, this, that, and the other, and so it's clear, so you don't have to wade through all of the language. It's a form that we're getting, essentially, and then you have to wade through the form to understand what's been included and not. So a very simple, visually easy to parse checklist, I think would be good.
And
We
let
can
me
work on
just
that.
add, because we do have a lot of historical commission members here, that I would like to see a checklist that includes listing on National Register or something that indicates the significance of the property, a contributing building in the district, whatever. A Form B, has the Form B been attached? We are not getting those, and so they're getting the meeting, and they don't even know the status of the building.
A Form B
They're doing
isn't
research.
required by our regulations, is it?
If it
It's historically significant, so if you're going to have a historic resource in the zoning bylaw, you should have the B form if one
It
exists.
should, but I don't think it's called out.
But that's, okay, not a lot, historic resources called out.
It's not a requirement, though.
The Form B is not a requirement. So if we want a Form B to be a requirement, we have to put it in the submission requirement.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, what you want is be great, but it's not actually written in the bylaw saying this is what you have to give
Well,
us.
well, that's back to art. We have in the bylaw that in a special permit or site plan review, the applicant's supposed to, or the project is supposed to consider whether its impact on a historic resource, and historic resource is defined. So ergo, one would think that getting a B form for a building would be something we would be wanting.
So you just need to set it up.
Meaning put it as a-
When I read the bylaw, I don't see it says, this is a definition of a historic resource, but some of that definition doesn't require that you have a Form B. I mean, if you really want a Form B, then we'll put it in there, but right now, I read it, it doesn't say that we need a Form B.
Well, you can put it in regulations.
We can,
We'll talk about it
What
later.
her point is that we need to establish the status of the property.
I understand. I understand where you're coming
Easily
from.
answered question.
But a developer looks at these requirements and it does not scream out, give us a Form B.
But frequently, our rulings in this regard have to do with not just the property itself, but where it sits. So for instance, if a 1950 house sits among a bunch of houses that were built 100 years ago, that's certainly of interest to us.
Then I think we need to get that language into some document because I don't think it's clear
Right.
enough in what
I
we have
agree,
now.
I'm just saying, I don't think it has to be in a bylaw. It just
No,
needs
it just has to be on the form.
procedural-
It just has to be on the
procedural
building
matter.
department form.
Yeah.
Let's take that offline. Brian, if you can make a note to include historic resource documentation somewhere,
If available.
if available.
And then,
And a reminder, it's not just National Register, that the survey of all buildings was done, of buildings dating prior to 1917. So, do I have the right date?
But we can,
Yeah.
we
All right,
can-
so let me just summarize where we
yeah,
are.
please.
All
We
right,
have to move
so,
on.
yep. So a fleshed out or updated checklist, so that all the boards know when an application is complete. Don't process it if it's not, or if you're getting handwritten stuff or stuff that doesn't comply with your requirements. The advisory boards write as clear a decision as you can, setting out the, the basis for the recommendation, and if you're disapproving something, what it would take to pass muster.
Could we
as
say
much
that
as you
we
can.
feel that if it doesn't pass muster, that if it's a minor or a major change? Could we define that in our recommendation? That the changing of this roof line to bring it into scale with the neighborhood is a major change of the design? Design review say that?
I mean, it depends how far out of scale it is, I suppose.
No, I
It
just,
depends on
we
the
make
facts.
that, like.
You can
at that
try.
point,
I mean, what you're essentially saying is to the ZBA is any change in the roof line, we'd like to have another crack at
Yeah.
that.
Well, I think that should be.
And,
reject
you know,
it.
if they may honor that, or they may say, you know, this really is minor, I don't care what they said.
Yeah, which they can always do, so.
But,
so
sure,
we'll
I mean, that's
put it-
part of the dialogue.
So, Brian, can you add that to our sheets of our recommendation on the items? We have the bylaws broken out for this.
Okay, all right, so that's this topic, I think. Both the opening application and the iterations to back to the different boards. Next topic is sign off on conditional permits. This issue is essentially when permits have conditions, how does anybody know whether they're complied with? And my view of that is the condition, one of the conditions can say to demonstrate compliance. I mean, depending on what the conditions are, of course. Demonstrate compliance before a building permit, before a C of O.
Who does that?
Well, it can't be before a building permit because the idea is we're given, so a special permit's awarded by the special permit granting authority, and then they apply for the building permit. How can you, the conditions haven't been
Well,
made.
if it's an as-built kind of condition, that's right. If it's give us a, you know, an acceptable landscaping plan or
Sure,
something
yeah,
else.
okay, yeah.
Some conditions will precede the building permit, some won't. So, yeah, I mean, you have to write
I
it
would-
accordingly.
Then, yeah, it would either be prior to a building permit or prior to an occupancy permit.
Right. And the answer to who should be the building permit.
So we-
Building.
So it's the zoning enforcement officer.
Right, yeah, that's right.
So we need to define a checklist, another checklist. I think we were working on this, which was to say that any permit with conditions would have those conditions reported to the building department. Well, they get it anyway.
Yeah.
But they have to go through and check it off. I'm concerned about conditions which can't wait until the end of the project. So let's say you have to use this type of stone, and they go off and in 2 weeks they completely clad it with something else, so they violated the condition. If you wait until the end of the project when they go for their occupancy permit, it's way too late to correct it.
Well, I mean.
What do we do about conditions that need to be corrected along the way?
In terms of a decision, it's pretty easy for the zoning enforcement officer. If it was a condition of the permit and you waited all to that long and they're like, oh, well, you can just be like, well, it doesn't matter. I mean, if it's not part of the permit, it's really that check that needs, we don't know if that final, you know,
But we want to be able to correct problems as we go along.
Ideally, yes.
I mean, my concern is that you're going to get to the end of the project, and so much time and effort has gone into the project, you're going to say, well, we don't want you to tear the whole thing down, because that'll cost you millions of dollars, so we'll just let it go. I mean, I'm just saying that, I don't know what the zoning enforcement officer would actually say in that situation, but we don't want a project to get to the point where they have to do major changes.
no, we wouldn't want that, but that's their, I mean,
That's their, what
I mean, if they're gonna be a bad business person,
I
then,
mean, I would say if somebody's building
Then you
something
rent-
and they know what the conditions are, because they've gone through the permitting process.
even if they didn't know, it's their business to know. Like,
Exactly, because ultimately they're responsible for it.
I mean-
And frankly,
Fancy Pitch has
if that
multiple
doesn't
conditions
happen,
that were never met.
oh, tell me.
It would go into the decision, these are the conditions, and it's a checklist there, but some of the conditions are, I know the planning board has done it for the CBD, is we have to review the stone selection prior to install. They do a mock-up, and we, the planning board, we go look at it and approve it or deny it at that point before it goes on the building. So, at that point, we actually would be the ones saying it's acceptable and checking off that list, because it's up to the special permit granting authority, not the zoning enforcement officer for that condition.
Okay.
Right, so there's certain ones that would be the responsibility of the zoning enforcement officer, there's others that are the responsibility of the permitting authority, correct?
Mhm.
So
But no reason that couldn't be the zoning enforcement officer. I mean, it's a zoning permit with a condition in it.
It's, yeah, it's a.
The zoning enforcement officer could be the one to inspect the mock-up. You don't have to do it at the board level.
I'd like to do it at the board level.
No, that's a very specific decision.
If you want to,
Well, I'm
fine.
just using that as an
Specifically,
example of.
Yeah, so somebody has to step in and do it, and if the permit granting authority decides they want to do it, I guess, the zoning enforcement officer's like, great, I can go get a coffee.
So would Art, back to Art, would the ZBA be able to say, especially on something like laying up stone, which, it's a veneer, and you have really no idea what it's going to look like, would it be acceptable for the ZBA as a condition that it would be approved as of, with a mock-up to be approved by the design review committee?
That would be the planning board's recommendation to the ZBA?
No, that it could be the ZBA's recommendation,
decision.
condition in their decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
If you
there
put
we are,
it
guys.
into the conditions, it would
Right.
probably.
Yeah,
close
that seems like a very reasonable condition.
They can't, so the principle on that is your conditions, you can't punt major issues to yourselves or to a different board or officer in your decision. The ZBA can't, or the planning board couldn't do that in a decision. You can punt more minor things or just enforcement
I wouldn't
things.
consider it punting as much as that it
Well, I'm-
can't be resolved. I mean, nobody even would construct on their own property when they're hiring a mason. They might want to see the sample before it proceeds.
I'm just saying, they couldn't say, the special permit is granted, come back to us, with some major aspect of the building, the cladding or the color, whatever. Color's probably minor, but, right, they have to address it. But if they say use this kind of cladding, then the enforcement of that condition, that's fine.
And actually, speaking of color, so there's a project on, that I guess everybody knows about, so I'll say it, on Diggs
Yeah.
Street, where it was color, and actually, everybody in the whole neighborhood got so upset that it got a whole new paint job.
Well,
Maybe it
is this
should have
in the CBD?
been- No.
Okay, all right.
So, but it was a ZBA, so
Okay.
maybe that should
Well-
have been subject to review after.
Well, okay, I mean, there are nuances to all of these issues, which you
But
probably...
it's possible.
So I guess what I come off with this is that if the advisory boards want to have, or think there should be conditions that they should have some input into, then they should be very clear in their opinions exactly what those conditions are, at what state in the project they would need to review them, so that, because that's the only bite at the apple they get to tell the ZBA what they would want. And the ZBA can't go back and read their minds, so make sure that it's clear to the ZBA what the board would like. This is just a communications issue. Be clear, so I think something that we just have to spend more time putting all those, the context in our decisions, our opinions.
Is there an issue right now with the decisions, the sign-offs that are required on those decisions not being clear enough to be, and that's why they're not being followed? The check, there's not a checklist with the decision.
Yeah, that would be,
I
We
don't,
don't have-
yeah, I don't know the protocol of the
Well,
zoning
I know the planning,
enforcement,
but we
I'll say.
can make it clear on the CBD that these are the conditions and this is the time frame of when they need to be met. On
Well,
our-
it just has to be clear who's supposed to check on that,
Right.
who's supposed to do the enforcement or the
Zoning
inspection.
enforcement officer.
well,
In most cases, I would think that's right.
yeah, the ZBA's decisions are pretty long and fairly complete, so the conditions are usually in there. So it's just.
They're embedded in there.
They're
that's-
embedded in
Yeah.
there.
That's the first page, the conditions,
They're on the first page?
just says the conditions right up front,
Bang, bang.
subject to these 4 conditions. yeah.
I always go and read the whole thing to the end, I probably forget what you have up front. But,
Yeah, it's right-
okay,
it's right I'm just, the easy one, yeah, but
Yeah,
the
okay.
conditions on page 1,
okay, so we should, so then, maybe we just,
maybe
They just need to be enforced.
they just need to be enforced, and maybe that we can discuss
So-
it with the building department if there's a problem, if there's some reason I don't know what our history of non-enforcement is. These are one of these things that if the project's out there and it's completed and no one looks at it, we don't know that it hasn't met all the conditions unless it goes
Just-
along.
Each of the boards, when you're suggesting or imposing a condition, just think about when and by whom it's supposed to be confirmed or verified or inspected.
Right.
Enforcement would be a different issue. We talk about, we're all using the word enforcement. It's really you just want an inspection to know the conditions being complied with. So just think about how that's supposed to be done and by whom. All right, next topic, notification to abutters of non-ZBA meetings. Sure.
Yeah, okay, so, a year and a half ago, when we when we made a zoning change that said that if, essentially that the planning board, design review, and historical commission, if there's consensus amongst these three boards and commissions, that,
No ZBA here. So now we have no ZBA here.
We just lost our ZBA.
yeah, that's true.
Sorry.
That's unfortunate. If there was a difference of opinion, that they just need to say their opinion. But because of that, now many of the abutters, or now we're not talking about applicants anymore, just all the abutters, they're like, well, now it seems like, regardless of your intention, that these meetings are more important than they used to be.
I think that's true.
Right? So because of that, now all the abutters, rightfully so, but they want to know when all these meetings are. Trying to figure out when that is. Had a brief conversation with Art. And we're talking is that one is the planning board specifically is that we run our public meetings related to special permits and site plan review very close to public hearings, meaning that we have a public comment period. Not that it's necessarily wrong, but it's not technically a hearing. And that's why you don't have these necessary notifications of all the abutters. The question is what's the best way to do it? Dieb and I have talked about this for a number of different conversations, and it seems like a website of some kind that the question is how would you let people know about this website? It seems like at the time of when the zoning board hearing goes out, which is at least it's usually 3 weeks before, when that notice goes out to all the abutters, you could have something on there. However, sometimes one of our boards or committees has already met in the time that has gone out. It's a weird spider web that, so then it's like, okay, well, what do we send the entire town out that if you're just, watch this? I mean, like, probably not, right? So there are a number of, there's a number of things through the website that you can do. You can, we can tell people to subscribe to the meetings of, these 4 meetings or whatever. And then if there's ever an address that comes up along that agenda, but you do need to be looking at them and, so there's nothing great. Basically, yeah.
We sort of came up with one solution. But I think it might work. So the problem with getting this stuff out by the building department is that the building department, and this has happened, the building department sent out a notice and someone already had the meeting and then the abutter was upset because one of the other boards had the meeting after they got the before they got the notification. So that didn't work. So the building department is leery of, and the building department has other reasons for worrying about this because anything we send out to the non-hearing meetings, the non-ZBA meetings, is essentially a courtesy. And if people begin to depend upon that, it puts an extra burden on the building department to get things out really quick, and sometimes that's not possible. So one option we came up with is that we would have a single website which would record building permits and the times for all the different committees, which would be
Special permit, not building permits.
I'm sorry, special permit numbers, and the dates where each of the different committees would meet and talk about and discuss it. Someone, and this is the part that's still a little uncertain, someone would send out a special postcard to the abutters that would say, by the way, you can go to this website, you can find out what all these meeting times are. And that would be the public notice. And we'd probably put language on there saying this is a courtesy, don't expect this to be, whatever.
You're lucky.
You're lucky. And then there would be personnel at town hall who would reach out to the committees, or the committees could reach out back to them and let them know when something's been scheduled on their agenda, so that page could be updated. So that's the formalism, I think, that the one that survived all of the different.
So yeah, the admin for the planning and engineering departments is happy to keep this Excel sheet with the meeting. I mean, it's really, there's not a lot going on there. The issue is simply how to let people know to come to this site because there's something going on development-wise on your street.
They wouldn't until they get the letter from the CPA.
So
We just keep checking it, or we put it.
So the problem, that's what Diep said, is that when they get the letter from the ZBA, one of our meetings could have already have met.
Exactly.
So
that's the
There's
issue.
something in the card on that.
Sorry?
Say something in the card. Advisory
Yeah.
committees may have already met.
Well, the card can go out earlier than than the letter from the building
Why is that,
department,
though?
because we don't have to meet all of the conditions to get a public hearing. So as soon as someone puts in a building, or special permit, we would be notified of that, and so we could do a much faster turnaround in getting this card out saying, hey, someone pulled a permit, or someone applied for a permit, this might be happening. It also might not be happening, because they may decide to, not continue with the application, but that's not our goal. So that would get it out to them faster.
So just curious, so that's basically double mailing.
Yes, it
That's
is.
money.
Yeah, and
And
But that's, I don't have a huge problem with it. I mean, it'd be a small additional, mailing cost.
well, I mean, I don't see why it couldn't go out with the ZBA, which is almost all the time 3 weeks in advance.
Right.
The situation Dia was talking about, it was over a holiday. It still went out 2 weeks. I mean, it still legally was there, but it happened to be it went out at 2 weeks, and it was 3 weeks prior. 2 weeks is not a lot, but I still think that it's 90% of the time it's 3 weeks or more.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't be a problem with that, but
The issue is the building department has decided not to put that language in their letter. So they tried it, it backfired, and they decided for internal reasons that they were going to revert to the old language, which didn't have any of that information. So we really, unless we convince the building department they have another go at it,
For the select
our only
board.
other option is to do a separate mailing.
Well, we could do, because now the postings are online, they're not through mail anymore for non-hearings. So why can't we just do a website, like you're saying, and saying these are when everyone's meeting?
No.
On that website page of the towns, and when a permit is coming in, it blasts that, you know how we get blasts, like people, you can see it through Facebook, there's certain things you can see
yeah,
that
if
the
it
town
goes, that's on the
blasts.
news. That's anything that goes on the news gets pushed to all those things.
There are people who don't want to get blasted by the town for everything that happens, but they still want to know what's going on in their, I mean, I think that it's the extra effort of the postage is worth it, just because a lot of people don't want to sign up to get blasted based on permits. They just, I think we have to meet, I just think we have to meet the people where they are. I mean, the only really impossible ones are when you have some project that opens up right next to like Parkview or something where you have to notify hundreds of people. And that's the one that really, otherwise it's usually a handful of people.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's under 40. But yeah, if it's near any of these complexes that have 300 units or 100 units, or it's just the nature of it.
The point is the ZBA is noticing people right away.
Exactly.
The application is filled out, right?
No,
No.
not right away. It's everyone gets
As soon
noticed
as
about
it's
3 weeks.
reasonable.
Yeah, everyone gets noticed about 3 weeks before the hearing.
It takes about a week and a half for the building department, after they get submission, an application, for them to get to the point where they're mailing the letter.
So this issue arises only because during that week and a half, if one of the other boards holds its meeting.
Yeah.
If that week and a half can be condensed, then it should all be done in one shot.
Right, but
Couldn't we push our meetings to make sure everyone's been notified?
We can try to coordinate them, but a lot of we're not going to do it we're going to be really good at it, but we're not going to be 100%.
It's easier for the planning board to do it, it's less easy, I don't want to put words, but it's not as easy for the historical commission.
Yeah, they only meet once a month, so
Right.
yeah.
So if
You
there's.
meeting 3-4
File
times a
them into
month.
the next meeting, and
Yeah.
that could be 3 days hence, or
Right.
But then the ZBA has the rules and regs that they need certain documents within so many days before their meeting, which then puts another damper on them.
I think that's something that could be changed. I mean, that's not the major issue. I mean, a lot of the historical commission's schedule is kind of, or a lot of the time, it's based upon what comes in the door when you have to have a hearing, right? So it's like, oh, well, we happen to be meeting in 3 days. Why don't we review that permit? And it's because it makes sense to do that. And that's really, that's,
And if we
you know, that's
wait-
just a normal thing. Like, the, you know,
The other boards are looking for our input.
Yeah.
If we wait, they won't get our input. So
it's tough.
we should go right away.
Right,
I
and
think
it
it's on
ends
the
up being a
CBA
circular.
card, you know, with disclaimers, and say, go look at the website, and we all.
Yeah,
There's a limit to how much we can hold people's hands.
Right.
well, I think if you can do it in one shot like that, it makes sense.
So-
That was the first idea we came up with.
Let the ZBA know it's taken.
But if there's always a website, people eventually start looking at that website more
Right,
often.
you get a couple of those things, you're like, oh, maybe I ought to check it. You know, if you don't care that
How
much,
do
you
you
don't
know
check
it's a
it.
project?
I mean, it's,
It says the
All of a
address.
sudden, they discover it's right next door.
I mean,
That's when you get that bad.
It's
I don't-
because,
yeah, I don't know if we've coming to any sort of real conclusion, except that
that the idea we had previously, we would still like to do.
we would still like to get it out on the ZBA letters.
Yeah.
That's something that the
Talk to the
ZBA
select
would
board.
have to work with the building department. The building department tried it, they decided they didn't want to continue with it. So, you know, we're sort of at a bureaucratic standoff here.
Back in the day, when there was not internet and technology like it was put in the paper.
It is put in the paper.
All the permits that are pulled are in the paper.
Oh, building permits.
All the building permits were
Yeah,
put in the paper. That, we don't have that anymore. There's no actually way to know someone pulled a building permit regardless of anything.
Right.
It's not present anywhere that I can find that's easily, unless you go into the building department, open and
We're about 3 to 5 years away from e-permitting where it will be like that, where you'll be able to do all of those wonderful things.
Why so long?
It's a lot of money.
What, now, you know how, I think Jennifer upstairs, somehow I've logged onto something, so she'll send out on Facebook, you know, this road is closed. The town has closed this road today for a detour, so you get
those
sort
are
of that
alert-
information.
So those are if you sign up for alert, there's alerts, there's
Yes.
news, there's hearings, there's bids, there's all these things that you can check off associated with an email address or a phone. One of them is public hearings, but then you're going through each of them to, you know, I think there needs to be something that says, look to the site because something's going on.
Yeah.
We were all done through Facebook?
No,
Okay.
no, God, no.
I don't think we can.
I'm not, I just can't figure it out.
I think anything that goes out on social media is nice, but if we want to reach people, we have to use US mail, because a lot of people
Yes.
don't live on social media. So, and I know other
But a
people.
lot of people don't open their mouth.
A lot of people.
Sorry, I like literally.
It's some of both. And
Nobody reads it.
I know, I'm not trying to be rude, I'm saying like, and people travel and people are working all day, so they maybe
But they
didn't get
will
the
see a
letter.
very bright red card that
Oh,
says.
it's a bright red card, okay, I thought it
I
said
don't
like
know,
town
for
of
what-
Winchester, and you're just like, whatever. Throw them in the husband's
Everybody
pile.
gets a stack of catalogs.
I understand.
Well,
that
I
there's
mean, there's,
And you miss stuff. It's very,
it's,
Well,
I think we've reached our,
what I don't understand yet is why the ZBA takes it a week and a half. I'm not saying,
it's the building department.
I'm building department, not the ZBA. I just, I don't know the
It's-
process well enough.
The process is basically, you go down there, it's very busy all the time.
Yeah,
They're
That's the-
understaffed.
that's what it is.
Thank you.
okay.
They're just
They're very
understaffed.
busy
Okay.
all the time,
Yeah.
period.
Eh,
sure they are.
So I guess, we don't have any brilliant solutions. We will press.
It's 8:20, I think we had a good discussion. We
Yeah.
can move on.
We should work on it.
If we have a page where this information is there consistently and it's robust and it's kept fresh and people know that's where they can go, they can
Yeah,
go
no,
have.
we already have that infrastructure ready.
Good, then we
Yeah.
have it, let's use it, let's get people used to going there and it'll happen. I mean, it's just
Exactly,
like-
because people will say, oh my gosh, I heard rumors about a development that's gonna be going on, I think I better try and look
And you
at
go to
it.
the page, that's right, it's right there.
Got the Winchester homepage, like, right, permits being under whatever review.
That's where it would be.
Yeah, that's where it would be.
That's prime real estate, though.
So who is?
This is a prime issue, though. That is the biggest, this is a prime
It could be a
issue.
spotlight, so there's 4 spotlights now, and they rotate, and there's, I mean, we can,
We can try.
That's not the biggest problem.
The town, the website, the software behind the town's website is cumbersome.
Yeah.
To be very, very kind to it,
A
so.
lot better.
It has gotten a lot
But if you've ever had to go in and actually play with the contents, you run away screaming very quickly.
So,
In any case.
to clarify, the planning board is the one who's gonna be doing that website then?
so
It's gonna go-
Suzanne will be updating that site. I will be giving her the information. It's gonna be very simple. It's gonna be a petition number and an address, and then the dates of all the meetings.
Oh, we're also gonna have links to the PDFs for the actual plan submitted?
No promises on that.
Eventually, though.
But yes,
We should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're available.
yeah.
They just need to be uploaded to the silly directory space and you put a link in. We'll work on it. It really
Okay,
needs to be
so,
there.
Yeah.
so we're taking it on. I just wanna,
Yeah,
for our
we're taking it
to-dos,
on.
we're taking it
The key
on.
thing is that the boards need, as soon as you schedule it on your agenda,
And yeah, any petition number that gets scheduled,
please,
just gotta let me know.
let Brian know.
I mean, it's not like they
so
don't
we can pass it on to
necessarily
Suzanne.
do that all the time.
And if you're not going to review it, because there's certain ones where they are not reviewed from the historical, you need to make sure you notify Brian that you are not going to be reviewing it, that you're passing on it.
And
If you do any of those anymore
Well, it's on our agenda, we make that decision.
in the meeting.
Yeah.
So whatever is on your agenda, if you have to continue it to another meeting, please let Brian know that as well. It will just be, every time there's a new, we're coming up with a scheme where you can, if there's a change to a meeting, they'll get a new entry in this table. So the old information will still be there, but there'll be a note saying things have changed. So for instance, if the plans change. Anyway, so I think we've dealt with that. So we'll go forward with that.
Okay. Next is interpretation of the zoning bylaw / guidelines. I'm not sure what issues generated this agenda item, but I'm happy to.
Well, we were hoping that
familiar.
people.
Well, it's actually one of the issues I was gonna ask earlier, but I waited to this point. So the planning board, we work really closely with you, and we have been, because you've been our consultant prior to being town council.
Yep.
You're our legal counsel. So, we have always referenced the dictionary when words are not defined. And so when we're interpreting and we're writing the zoning bylaw, we try to define things as much as we can, but there's certain things that we found that are not defined and are being misinterpreted because they are not referencing a dictionary on certain terms that we have inside of our zoning.
Okay.
So, so it was one of the, we were hoping that I think the ZBA was going to be here so we could talk about it a little bit more. But there's been discussion among the planning board of what ways can we do to help with that interpretation of the zoning. Is it saying, if you do not recognize a term here, please reference this dictionary in our zoning? Because there's, the members are churning over and you're not always present at those meetings to give them the guidance that when a word is, so that was kind of, or do we need to start defining our words more, like what is a dormer? What is in our zoning, we can't ask the ZBA because they're not here anymore where they're finding struggles and are interpreting the zoning bylaws that we've been working on, but we do know one of the issues is words.
Ideally, you would define any terms that don't have a everyday definition, okay, and a commonly understood definition. And if you're going to bother referring to a dictionary, don't make people go look up the dictionary just to find it.
That's right.
Well, I guess the concern is if there are words that we don't have defined, but which, for instance, we don't define dormer. And yet there are definitions of dormers in architectural dictionaries or things like that. And so at the planning board, we do have people with that sort of background, so they can say, okay, this is what this means. At the ZBA, they may not have people with that background, so they're at a loss in trying to understand. And so the idea might be to simply say, here's a standard reference for terms which you may not be familiar with. Here's a standard reference which could be supplied saying, here, go turn and use this.
Because so the planning board is dealing with a lot of the language that the design review and historical is using, but they're not always clear language to lawyers who are not in the design profession. I think a lot of the terms that we've been struggling with are architecture terms.
Mhm.
And they're not, a lot of times the applicant's architect then defines it in their own, they kind of put spins on it, but it's pushing it away from the actual definition. And so we're trying to find ways to how we can be clear in the language in the zoning bylaw that there is no such thing as a contemporary dormer. That if you go to the dictionary, that there is no contemporary dormer. So you can't say that's a contemporary dormer because they don't exist, based on the dictionary and the definition.
You can try and define it in the narrative of the bylaw. You can put pictures in, like we did last year on the detached versus attached structures.
Actually, no, the
And-
pictures didn't make
You-
it.
you pulled them.
We pulled them from the bylaw, but they were in the report, right?
Yes.
In the report to
I think
town
the
meeting.
intention- Yes, but I think the intention was to develop guidelines.
ZBA uses them.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
I mean, they have them at the table.
if they're in the report, they're sort of the legislative history of that bylaw amendment. I mean, that's the idea. If the planning board
I'm sure you're right, but I'm not sure that's understood.
but,
So
May not-
pictures,
Right,
define
that's
it.
a huge point.
but it could be in a separate guideline, and your preference apparently is to put it in a separate guideline because you didn't want the pictures in the bylaw.
That's a judgment call. All bylaws have some pictures, like what's a corner lot or what's a rear yard, if it's an oddly shaped lot or something. I mean, all bylaws have some kind of diagrams. I guess I thought with something amorphous like attached, detached, you could have 20 pictures about different designs, about what's sufficiently contiguous or what has the unified massing and what doesn't. I just thought putting a few pictures in might not actually help somebody
Okay.
in all cases. Whereas the diagrams you see about corner lots, they give you a formula, or they'll, or
I think we don't have any diagrams in our zoning bylaws.
We do in the
There is,
CBD.
yeah, we
In the
do.
CBD, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so
So
just
if, so,
define it,
pictures in, I mean, pictures, if pictures really answer the question, this is what we mean and this is not what we mean, and that's all the cases that are going to arise. Okay.
We had, a few months ago, we used those pictures. There was a developer that came to us.
Cross street.
Yeah, and we had a great meeting, and he, I think if we'd just been talking, he was not educated architecturally, but what, we were able to show him the pictures and say, well, this is what we're talking about, and he got it.
No, they came back, he
So
came
I
back
think they're
and
very
revised the
valuable.
plans and.
I think I was told that the tradition in Winchester is not to have pictures in the bylaw, and that's,
Not by us, but.
no, by other,
Well, it's just, I'm just saying, it's a resource that we have found very helpful.
good.
So
So-
I think
But
for
it-
all of us, though, nobody's got the legislative history probably, except I didn't pull it out at the time. I stuck it in.
Of course,
But we
Marty,
really
that's
have to
okay.
put this in some document, it should be scanned, it should be.
Well, it was in the report to town meeting.
No,
No, I
but what that would go
understand.
into the planning board's rules and regs, which we actually don't even have. So that's where it would go. It should go into ZBA rules and regs as well. They are effectively using
or
it
you
as
call
part of the
Brian.
rules and regs, which is actually the most important.
Right.
So,
Yeah, but I mean, it needs.
Then
to be
we're all
online,
cooked.
it just-
Another reason that this particular agenda item is in here is because we want to make sure that other boards, and especially the ZBA, when they're interpreting the zoning bylaw, that they're interpreting it in a way that we thought we wrote it.
Yeah.
And so,
there's a problem with that.
wait, let me continue. So, if a board is not interpreting it, then it's up to the planning board to clarify what's in the zoning bylaws. At least that's the way I look at it. There's an intent, there's an interpretation, and then if we're feeling that our language isn't clear enough, then it's up to us to clarify.
I'm going to modify what you said a little
Sure.
bit, which is, the question is, what did town meeting mean when they adopted the bylaw? You made a recommendation to town meeting. You may have had something in mind. Town meeting may or may not have had that, the same thing exactly in mind.
Well, we often use, at the town
and-
meeting, when we're bringing things up, we often use illustrations.
Okay, but just in general, whether it's narrative or illustration, the zoning board has to interpret what town meeting meant, and their interpretation may not be exactly what you intended going in. What you said after that was right. If you're unhappy with how it's being interpreted, you can always propose an amendment.
Right. I'm actually a little confused, because often it's not obvious what town meeting interprets. I mean, because.
It's like a meta conversation.
Yeah, because,
I know,
mean,
I know.
you have a few people stand up saying, giving their opinion, and then town meeting votes overwhelmingly in one direction, but we still don't know how they interpreted the bylaws. All we know is they voted one way.
Well, and then all the boards and the courts and town council have the job of figuring out what the bylaw amendment means based on the language. We may resort to dictionaries, we may resort to case law, we may resort to your report to town meeting, because that's sort of the intent of the relevant committee.
So who's reviewing all that with the ZBA? Because the ZBA meets a lot of time during our presentations.
During town meeting?
During town meeting, they have meetings. So they're not present at town meeting.
Yeah, they're basically rarely, right now, I think there's one member of town meeting on the ZBA. Basically, there's a real actual.
Well, the ZBA deals with it when an issue comes up, I guess. I mean,
I think it's
No sense.
I think it's part of the planning board's responsibility to inform the boards of changes.
So that's the question. So
Yeah,
going
but we-
after town meeting, should the planning board or be meeting with the ZBA
I think so.
afterwards to go over the decisions of town meeting? The language isn't actually, because there are modifications on the floor.
I thought we were gonna try to institute some type of post-town
Yes.
meeting, like, what's the word, like a debrief of what actually happened, because some people either didn't go to town meeting, or the bylaw could have changed slightly during the course of town meeting.
This actual meeting here is the first of such, except we decided to put in all this other stuff because we really.
Because we hadn't have done
but
this yet.
it would be a good idea if the zoning bylaw changes in any significant way to have a meeting with the
Yeah,
boards and arrive at a common understanding or not.
right.
It could be fun.
And how do you continue that through different memberships of the boards and committees? How do you continue that? Just efficiency, staff
Well-
changes?
Well,
I'm just looking for,
that's not a legal, there's no
It's
legal
not a
answer,
legal
right?
thing, I'm just-
You can do it as often as you feel
Yeah.
necessary, as much time as you want to commit to it. Rarely is there a wholesale change from one year to the next. So you've always got some institutional memory and sort of this rolling memory on by all the boards, by all the commissions. I don't know, if you want to meet and discuss it,
Yeah.
meet and discuss it.
I think the way to do that is to have, not continuous discussions, because that would get tiresome, but to have scheduled discussions several times a year where we actually sit down and talk with each other. I think that's the only way of improving communications and letting, I don't know any other way around it.
maybe we need to get on the ZBA schedule versus show up on their meeting schedule.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that they weren't able to come here for the whole meeting, but we certainly have to, it's difficult getting all four groups together at once, and really appreciate all the people who managed to show up.
Well, it seems to me the next meeting should have more ZBA members and may not need the entire memberships of the other boards and commissions. Each of you could send one person, and at least the advisor, design and historical, if you don't all want to come to it. What you really want is planning and ZBA in the room.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, 8:35.
Yeah.
Next topic is outside consultants. My understanding is that this was raised by Design Review. I'm not sure exactly who I'm looking at, but
Planning board as well.
Planning Board, okay. So, here's the statute, 53G, Chapter 44, Section 53G. The ZBA can require payment of money for outside consultants under Chapter 40A, the zoning act, under Chapter 40B, affordable housing. The planning board can do it under Chapter 41, subdivision. The Board of Health can do it under Chapter 111, public health issues. The Conservation Commission can do it. Or if there are rules promulgated by any municipal permit or license granting officer or board when implementing authority conferred under any statute, ordinance, or bylaw. Planning board is a permit granting board, right, special permit granting authority. And in a special permit, you could require payment for outside consultants if you have rules, if you have promulgated rules to do that, which you do. Design review, I have more doubt that that's a permit or license granting board.
They're not, but they could recommend to us or to the zoning, like if it's subdivision or whatever, they could recommend to us to do that.
That
Correct.
That your rules would require payment of consultants before the design review committee as well?
Well, it would be either us as the special permit granting authority in the CBD, or us through subdivision, that couldn't the design review say, hey, planning board, we think it's a good idea for you to hire a design consultant. They have, I mean, that's within their recommendation. They can do that, right?
And the design consultant would consult to
The planning board.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure, they could suggest that you do that, sure. You can do it under your authority with or without such a suggestion, but nothing stops them from suggesting it. I thought you meant they could ask you to hire a consultant for their meetings.
Yeah. Well, couldn't we,
Naturally.
or we could jointly meet, or could we just send the consultant over their way and then say we want the report back? Because they, even in the town bylaw that has the design review committee, they are advisory to the planning board.
Right,
So
but-
that would be how you.
But if there are extra expenses for the consultant to attend those meetings, the applicant may say, I don't have to pay for that. If it's one meeting and the applicant's willing, then it's no issue.
Here's what our language says in our rules for our 7.3 Center Business District. This is, it just says, it's, I have page 22, it's under consultation. Let's see, the SPGA board may consult with other boards, commissions, and departments to ensure complete site plan review and design review. The SPGA, us, may utilize MGL Chapter 44, 53G peer review consultants. Any cost will be the responsibility of the development team.
So the SPGA can utilize a consultant. Doesn't say the SPGA can give that consultant to design review.
Oh, no.
No, it doesn't say that specifically.
That's a run through the SPG. What about historical with their permits, the demo permits?
Historical is, yeah, I mean, if that's, yeah, that's a permit granting board. Yep, they
Demo
could,
permit.
yep, they could have rules.
You don't issue it, the bill, but,
We don't have it to issue.
well, it's the same thing like us. We don't actually, like, give the building permit for, when we write a special permit, or when we grant a special permit, we're not granting a building permit. That's done by the building department. But in the historical commission's case,
Well, you have specific authorization to adopt rules to require consultants.
yes.
The historic would be under that catch-all, rules promulgated by any municipal permit or license granting officer or board. So,
you need more
but you're not
rules.
just advisory, right? I mean, you decide on
Oh, yeah.
a demo permit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can withhold the
Again,
demolition
right.
permit
Yeah.
for 12 months, right.
We make a decision as to whether it should be delayed. We don't issue that.
Completely stop.
Well, you actually can release it, so I don't know what that means, but you hold the
We could
permit and you
suspend
release it.
We could
I would,
the delay.
I think it's a defensible position. It's not clear that it would be upheld, but I think it's enough of a permit.
Well,
It-
we had this discussion with the select board in January. We hire a consultant to do the B form, which is a cost of $500 a pop. And we felt it was, and the select board agreed that it was just that the taxpayers not put that bill in, that they impose a fee on every demolition permit application. And that we agreed the amount would be $150, with the idea that we would go towards that $500, because not every single demolition application requires a B form. But the town has not collected those fees yet. We're still waiting for the procedure to get into place.
But I think the question here is whether we can ask the applicant to pay
In-
for this service.
I guess indirectly we are. That
You're asking the applicant to pay $150 that may not be used on the applicant's case, it may be used on
That's a
two cases later.
That's a fee.
Yeah, that's just a
It was
fee.
approved in the bylaw.
But this is about
14.
This is different, this is a state law that you guys have access to, that we
Right.
never considered.
So,
They're saying they might not need it.
yeah,
They're
I'm
saying
saying
that
we're
they
not-
can do it through a fee.
Well,
Because it'd be through a fee that you'd be
I'm still
able.
not sure we fall within a permit
I'm
grant.
not sure either.
I'm not sure either, but I said if you want to do it, I think it's a defensible
If you
You
position.
should definitely make a determination about answering that question,
If
whether
we
we're
had the
permit
authority
granting
to
or-
say
Okay.
you may not ever have a demolition permit, ever, under any circumstances, then I would agree with you, but all we're doing is giving them a speed bump. We can't stop them from demolishing the house.
Right, but you can stop them for
12 months.
a year,
It's a speed bump.
which is not an insignificant speed bump for some projects.
So
Yeah, I
if,
mean,
But
it's the
if-
equivalent of a permit.
So you guys are
If you-
arguing that you don't want what council is saying, you
What's-
just want to be
what's-
sensible.
If you want me to answer that question, I will, to the extent there's an answer out there.
One of the things we might want to do is ask the planning board to hire a consultant under, what is it, 53G?
53G,
In a site, site.
You would be asking
review.
ZBA for it,
ZBA.
because it has, so,
The ZBA would be the permit granting authority.
yeah, unless it's in the
Unless
C.
Well, maybe there may be cases where we want to do that.
Yeah.
but I think the historical commission still has to answer the question. If they are permitted to use 53G for the demo delay, let's just say you have that authority,
I would
do you
argue we
want
do.
it? You would want it.
Yes, I would, absolutely.
And so you have to convince the other members of your board that they actually, that you
I
need
suppose
that.
you're right.
And so my question is,
More authority is always better than less, right?
well, no, it's the money. It's assuming,
Well,
you-
the authority to ask for.
well, let's assume you have the authority, which Art will find out yea or nay, hopefully. You need to make the decision, if you get the 53G, what would you use it for? And obviously, I mean, that's the part that I think, I haven't heard a clear idea from the historical commission, what you use the 53G separately from the $150 permit.
We would use it to document the building in question in, up to Mass Historical Commission's methodology, which is what we call a B form. I can explain what that is in
No,
about 2
I understand
seconds.
the B form.
You know what it is, okay.
But it's $150 that you're asking the fee would not
No,
cover
no,
that.
no. They cost $500,
Okay.
which is reasonable, and we would say to the applicant,
Yeah.
you have to pay for this as part of your application process.
So this would be in lieu of the $150?
Well, yeah, I think it would be in lieu of the
Okay.
$150. But we want it every single time. We really need it every single time.
Every request for a demolition permit that comes under the aegis of our bylaw, i.e. built before 1941, or falls within one of the two inventories, they would have to pay $500, but not all the other demolition permits, is what essentially what you're saying.
I'm just trying to understand, you.
No, I think this is where we're driving, and I
would
we have
see
the
it,
authority to do that.
I would, if the authority is there and it says you can have, like 53G, like let's say someone came in for Lantern Lane and tried to demolish one of those houses. Before you do that, it wouldn't just be that one unit, it would be the entire area that you would want to do a report on. So that is a substantial amount for a consultant to do that area.
Fair,
And
but
so that would be, you'd go to 53G and say, for this, you
I'm
need
glad you
to.
cited that example, because we already have the B form. So in those cases where we already have a B form in hand and they're
You don't need to use 53G.
Yeah, we don't need it.
No, but there are
then
certain,
we
I just
don't-
use that as an
then
example.
Those people are off the hook, they just
Yeah.
got lucky.
Yeah.
Does that seem right?
Well,
Is there any other time you would want to hire
The
a
whole point,
consultant?
just to get the data?
Basically, if the building in question that we're having a hearing over, that they want to demolish, if there's any, I mean, we just do it now. We have a mechanism for paying for it, but this would be justified and more fair, if you ask me, just have the applicant apply, pay for it. And, it's the cost of demolishing historically significant buildings, sorry.
Well, it's an option out there for you. So I.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe.
I think we
Yeah,
need
no,
to.
I know, but
yeah,
it's
we
an
need to
option
answer
for
the question
discussion, for
because it
further
may solve
discussion.
a big
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, may solve our budget problem.
Well, in order to inform, Board of Selectmen.
Yeah,
If
then they would revoke the fee that they imposed.
Well, that would be a
Right.
good way to pay for it too, but they have to,
Yeah,
they
well,
have
you
to
could have a
ask that
standard,
people
I mean,
pay the fee.
Separate from that, just, it's totally appropriate to just have a permit fee. I mean, permit fees exist for all sorts of things, and you just have a
Yeah.
permit
I
fee
think
for
that's what I'm
demolition.
asking.
Right.
Very
That's
specific question.
moves
Yeah,
into,
permit fees are typically for processing, the staff time for processing applications or incidental expenses. It's not, I mean, if you need it,
It's outside staff, but it's staff time.
right.
But there's
you're
like,
right.
well, when you say it's outside staff, it's an outside consultant.
Yes.
But
So-
it's also, fees for the demolition permit can also cover your staff, which would be your recording secretary, And also the mailings and the notifications are also included in all that.
Well, there are two separate issues, unfortunately. I think that the building permit application fee would have been a blanket for any application. All of this money would be going to a pool, and we wouldn't need to use it in every single case. We'd need to use it in, it would be a fund that we could draw on when we need it. And we worked out the numbers, and it kind of worked.
I'm sorry, I missed that. You're talking about your permit fee, the 150.
This is,
Yeah.
permit fee versus
Demolition.
53G.
Yeah.
It's a reasonable fee for a demo permit.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
fine.
by a long shot.
Application.
Still,
Another
by a
fee when they.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, based on how much it costs. Yeah,
exactly.
still, $150
And the
for a
Board
demo.
of Selectmen
That's-
agreed with us, but
$500 though does seem like maybe that's I don't know, for every single demo permit.
well,
If you can make it work with
these are two
150.
entirely different methods for
Yeah, yeah,
accomplishing the same
exactly.
thing. So 53G, I think, works on its own, and a universal application fee works on its own. One or the other would be fine.
Revenue,
Well,
revenue is good.
We don't need them both. We need one or the other.
Well, if you,
Maybe the 53G way is more straightforward and easier and cleaner. And
Except that it has to come through the ZBA. so-
right, the ZBA has to agree that
Like all.
to do it.
Right.
We have to get approval of the Board of Selectmen to exercise that.
Exercise 53.
53G.
No, it would be the ZBA.
ZBA would give us, they'd either say yes or no. Give us the money, or tell the applicant to do it or not.
Exactly. I mean, it would depend.
Wait, no, wait, are you talking about demo permits or are you talking about special permits? Special
Demo
permits.
permits, just demo
ZBA is not
permits.
involved. ZBA is not involved. You didn't say it, he did.
Yeah, let's, yeah.
I didn't, yeah.
You didn't.
That was not
I
my
know.
question.
You said select board.
I did,
Yeah.
correct, because we're, we're holding.
You're an entity
We're
of
appointed by them, we're a
Yeah, yeah.
division of them, and they gave us the authority under our town bylaw to issue the $150 fee. Hasn't been done.
Yeah, why hasn't it?
So, what I wanna know is whether,
We're trying to clean that up.
if
and
we
haven't.
have this authority, whether we still have to get approval by the board of selectmen.
okay.
Excellent.
Arts on, action item.
Okay. Right, action items, we're 2 minutes ahead of schedule.
So far, I have very few on my end here. Not really an action item, but just going to go through this in terms of ZBA is going to determine a major or minor revision. We want to get some checklist requirements, should reflect the bylaw, so whatever in the submission requirements for site plan, special permits, variances, and appeals, those exact things should be in the checklist area along, in the checklist on the front of these applications, so that we aren't reviewing incomplete plans. The general consensus out of most of this evening, I still feel, is that boards and commissions should be writing more in their decisions, in their votes and motions. That's just the general comment is that, I mean, there's other stuff here, but it's basically, if you're going to vote negative, it might be helpful for the ZBA for you to write what it would need to do or could do to make it a favorable action. This could prevent a lot of this back and forth. What else? Including historic documentation if available for all special permits and site plan reviews, a new recommendation sheet for the planning board to vote whether or not a revision is major or minor. Then if advisory boards thinks that there should be conditions, they should be clear in their opinion of what those conditions are and state in the project the ones that they would like and when they should review them.
One clarification, the second to last one, the penultimate one, it's actually on all of the boards to indicate whether it's a major or minor.
Okay.
And I just want to say one thing about circulating draft decisions. Mark and I have talked about this with respect to the ZBA practice. It goes all the way back to the open meeting law discussion. If one board member or commission member drafts a decision and circulates it to the others for review, that's a deliberation. It's review of the substance, the conditions, the language. That's a deliberation, so that should not be done. So either one person just writes it and files it in a simple case, or if everybody needs to review a draft, it needs to be done at an open meeting. And the draft can be circulated ahead of that open meeting as long as it's
People can
posted on the
be able to
website.
review it and then have discussion.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend posting a draft decision on the website because then every change from the draft to the final becomes fodder for litigation by one
Exactly.
side or the other. But it's possible. The better course is just to review it at the meeting, if you feel that everybody needs to do it. If you can do one person just doing the decision, or the two people, assuming it's not a three-member board. So less than a quorum, if you're willing to trust them to put the decision in final form, that's fine. Or one person working with staff, or whatever. But just be careful about circulating draft decisions.
So the ZBA always has to do it, if at all, in open meeting, because they are only 3 people making a decision.
So they could not have 2 people doing it. They could delegate to one person in a simple case, or one person with staff, or, or with me.
And that has to be a vote. Does that have to be a vote of the board? Like, so when we delegate, we vote usually, or we.
Vote to
How
delegate.
formal does the delegation have to be?
Well, usually it's, again, drawing on my own experience, we vote to grant a permit. Okay, who wants to write this one? Fine, you write it. And then it's done. And it never comes back to the board.
So we,
So there's no formal delegation.
But we're
In
really
some
clear
towns, I
on
think
ours.
staff writes it up, or staff signs it, which I always found a little funny.
We're pretty
We get
language
down,
heavy.
yeah, we get down to the nitty gritty
In our
in the
meetings.
meeting.
Yes.
yeah, well, we have a slightly, so Brian takes notes on our deliberations. He formulates the final decision, essentially the words are his, he puts it all together. My name eventually gets on there because it comes from the chair to the ZBA, but is it okay for Brian as a staff person to send it to the board? If it's not emanating from a member of the board? Or does that still?
To send it to the ZBA, you mean?
No, to the rest of the.
Oh, to the rest of the
planning.
board?
For
Yeah,
comment?
For comment to Brian, or is that going to be a deliberation, even though it comes from a non-board member?
I don't have a problem in sending the draft. What I'm concerned is getting back comments, even if there was no cross-discussion, getting back comments that he's then folding in to a revision. That sounds like the board has effectively deliberated.
Yeah.
He's sort of taking their comments and putting them together, reflecting them in a revised decision.
So I should work with one member of the board
Right,
and we
I
write
mean,
it.
we
and that's
have,
it.
we have.
Or discuss it at open meeting, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, usually our schedule is such that we won't be able to do that before the
We meet a
ZBA's
lot.
meeting. So
Right.
it'll just be Brian and the chair, or
We
Brian,
do.
whoever, okay. We will have to change our procedure.
All right.
We'll figure it out.
Yep, and I will tell the
Okay.
ZBA that they need to modify that as well.
And for the other boards, then same problem, basically, I mean, they don't have Brian either, they're just trying to get it all in the meeting. Yikes.
Well, it's
I
all
don't know how you've been
delegated.
drafting.
Or you delegate it to 2 people.
Yeah, I wonder if we designate one other person, like I
The-
could submit the minutes
It's a
to.
big burden and to try to capture it. Even though at our board, I know we really do dictate, I don't know how you guys are working, but we're.
Yeah, we're
but
pretty,
even
we're
with
pretty
dictating
specific.
a
By the time we're at the end of the
all
motion,
way,
it's pretty specific.
I mean, we're doing a lot of wordsmithing at the table, but even so, I think, things we touch.
There might be a few little things,
Well, I think
they get by.
we need, in order to, to make sure we don't violate open meeting, I think that we should then formalize all the steps that go into writing a decision or an opinion and make sure that it captures everything. And that's you get one bite at the apple,
Right,
unless you're
that's
going to come
right.
back to another meeting, which is really not possible.
Right, it's not.
Maybe we should have it on the screen then, when you're typing it,
Yeah.
so that we see it and
I
that's
agree.
it.
Just
in
vote
the
it.
meeting,
And
yeah.
that's, well, you guys use a screen too, but that, I don't know if you do that.
Not for that.
I use my notebook.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
No, but you can get it on the screen.
Yeah.
And then
That-
historical, you've got the same issue.
No, but you guys have been you do your whole motion, then she reads it back. In the meetings I've attended,
That's right.
you state it, she reads it back, and that's exactly what shows up in
We
the.
make changes if we don't, I push it
I mean, we pretty much do the same. The only thing that we've been adding lately is when we add context to the decision, it's the context which gets wordsmithed. The actual
The
wording
votes,
of
the votes and motions can't get.
Votes and motions never
Right,
change.
they are what they are.
But when we add more context, someone may say, oh, you forgot to add this.
Right.
And so so that
And
doesn't
that's
count
is
as a
that allowed?
deliberation, because it's not, but it is context to the vote, so that still counts.
That still counts.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so we'll just
If it
have,
was discussed in open meeting, it was left out in the memo. That's deliberation. I mean, if there's already decided it was part of that decision, and maybe that goes, that was left out in the memo.
And then what? Well, what's the open meeting law issue?
There isn't, because it's already been discussed at the table, it just was left out in the memo.
right, but the point
Did
is,
we catch
we
things
can't,
as the
we
issue?
can't rediscuss it to put it back in the memo.
That'd be good, huh?
Whoever's drafting the decision has to capture everything you want to capture, or if one other person can review it without violating open meeting law, then you do that.
Sorry.
Okay.
Or you bring it back to open meeting and say that, does this draft capture it?
Or you get WinCam to post the video again real quick, and so we can watch the meeting again.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord, no.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're
Okay.
getting really close to the end. And I actually have one really quick question. Could you please define for me what a roll call is? Because it's required to enter
To
executive session.
You have to go to each person.
You're going to have to go to each person around the
What do you
table.
vote, what do you vote?
Okay.
So if you were coming this way, you'd
Okay.
ask me, and then you'd.
Okay.
Yeah, you just call their name and they vote, call their name.
So
call
it does
their name.
require calling them name?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
well,
Because it's gonna happen in 6
So it's a roll call.
I mean, you can,
Or
I
we can
mean,
make
you,
one and-
you,
When it's so
look,
few of us, it's
when people know the drill,
Okay.
we can say, I need a vote on executive session, and if Betsy says aye and Maureen says aye, and
Okay.
Yeah,
I
this
just
is
want to
that.
make sure I get it, because in the past I have not been knowledgeable. So, okay.
Sorry.
that was an easy one.
I leave the easy ones to last, makes everyone feel good.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? We've covered a lot of ground, and you may, if you think of questions, please come back to me or to anybody.
I think it's great
Thank
to
you all
see
for your
these
attention.
people here. There's
It
so
is.
much.
Thank you all very much.
It's all good.
Hope it was useful.
I think we're gonna adjourn for 5 minutes.
So different boards need to adjourn, ZBA doesn't, because they never actually convene.
Oh, yeah.
Special permits don't.
So, yeah, I guess, there needs to be a vote to adjourn your meetings.
Oh, we have to?
Yeah, you need to adjourn your meetings.
Oh, we never convened.
Yeah, so we don't have to adjourn.
Well,
We're now wasting.
well, yeah, I mean, we sort of all,
Both of you.
you all simultaneously,
open.
you all convene together with the opening
together.
statement.
Okay.
I was late.
So just vote to adjourn, vote to adjourn and we're done.
Vote to adjourn this joint meeting. Do I
No,
have a motion on the floor?
I'll make a motion.
well, no,
to adjourn.
planning board adjourn, each board should adjourn.
Okay.
Adjourned.
Okay,
Okay, good enough.
great. Glad you've taken all my advice to heart.
Everyone said
So
it.
the planning board, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I have a motion.
Okay.
Ms. Prager?
Betsy seconds.
Somebody
Meister?
donated a pen.
We, actually, no, we have to,
Anybody's
All in favor of adjourning this open meeting?
wait, no.
Didn't-
No, we have to vote.
Yeah, we'll
No,
have
we're
to have,
adjourning, we are
a separate
adjourning
vote
the
to go
other
into
meeting.
executive.
We're adjourning the public meeting.
We're adjourning the joint meeting, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break,
And open the open meeting.
and then we're going
Exactly.
to
Then we're
open
going
the
to
executive session.
Session.
First, you have to open an open meeting.
Right, so we're just
And
taking
then
a vote
executive.
here.
Okay.
You're not,
do I have a
if you're not adjourning, you're going into executive session.
We're going to executive session. Okay.
Okay.
But can we take a 5-minute break?
Yes, yes. We are going to take a 5-minute break. Hey, Winchester, sorry for the confusion. We will be taking a 5-minute break until,
9:07.
essentially, it's until about 9:05 I have.
9:05.
9:05.
And at that point, we will be entering executive session to discuss personnel review.
If there's an appropriate vote, roll call vote to do so?
Yes, if there's a roll call vote to do so, we will not be, we will be adjourning from the executive session. We will not be opening up another open session. We're all going to go home.
Okay, so moved.
Okay, so we have a 5-minute break.
Yes.
Yeah. So in light of the agenda, is there really any reason for WinCam to continue?
No, WinCam is Mr. WinCam back there? Yes, I've conferred with him earlier, and he knows that we can cut off.
Okay.
So, yes, so Winchester,
Good night, Winchester.
no, I think Winchester, we could say goodbye to Winchester.
Yes, good night.
Okay, good night, Winchester.